Okay, I'm going to run through the timeline of what happens when Jesus is crucified. So in AD 30, and this is based on the evidence we have, in AD 30, it would be the 13th of Nisan on a Thursday, which would be April 6th. Jesus is somewhere in this area in an upper room celebrating the Passover with his disciples about, after 6 o'clock. And they go over through the Kidron Valley, which is this valley right here, and over to imagine a mountain right here, the Mount of Olives, and they're in a garden, Gethsemane, and it's getting late. It's in the early hours of the morning, and now it's Nisan 14, which in our calendar is April 7th, AD 30. And this is when Jesus is arrested at 1 in the morning. Around that time, he's arrested. So it's Friday, 1 in the morning. And he's arrested and he's taken through the Kidron Valley up into the House of Caiaphas. Now, first he goes, the House of Caiaphas is right up here. I'll show you where it is. First he goes before Annas, who used to be the high priest, but he was removed as high priest from the Romans. And that's when he's first beaten. You can see a gate here. You can imagine them taking Jesus through this gate. This is the complex. This has actually been discovered. Caiaphas' house, his bones have actually been discovered in an ossuary box, a burial box, bones of a 60-year-old man and 2 children. And on the box was written Caiaphas. So his bones have been discovered. This is where his house would have been. And that's been discovered. And after he goes to Annas, he goes before Caiaphas. Now, it's probably about 2 or 3 in the morning, and Caiaphas gets all the leaders up in the middle of the night. Okay, you got to remember, this is the middle of the night, so that the people don't know what's going on, the people that love Jesus. And they condemn Jesus here as the Jewish leaders. They were members of the Sanhedrin, the ruling council, and they were members of the religious party of the Sadducees. That was the high priest party, were the Sadducees. So they condemn him. Then they want to get him killed, crucified by the Romans in a violent way. So they take him from this house, and the most likely place they take him is to Fortress Antonia. See, right at the tip of my finger, it's right on the edge of the Temple Mount. It's probably where Pilate was stationed. Now, Pilate was the governor at the time. Judea and Jerusalem was ruled by a Roman governor, not a king. There were no Herods ruling Judea because back in the day, the Herod that was ruling Archelaus, he got kicked out, and so the Romans said, forget it, we're going to rule Jerusalem with a governor. So Pilate's here. That's why they take him before Pilate. Pilate says, I can't find anything wrong with this man. He says, you kill him. But they don't want to kill him themselves, the Jewish leaders, because for 2 reasons. One, if they kill him, it's the Jewish way, which is going to sound crazy, but it's a little more humane. They stone him. But the Romans kill in a very publicly violent way through crucifixion. So they want to kill him in a different way, but mostly they don't want to have to take the blame. They want plausible deniability. They want to be able to say to the people who rise up against and say, why did you kill this man? They want to say, we didn't kill him, the Romans did. So, but Pilate says, forget it, you take him. So they bring him over to Herod. Herod wants to see him. So Herod's palace is right here, right in front of us, right here. So they bring him to Herod and this complex right here. See this? We know this is the palace of Herod. And Herod's more curious. He's just heard a lot about Jesus, and he's like, he wants him to do a magic trick and all kinds of stuff and entertain him, and doesn't work out for Herod. So he's like, he's like, get this guy out of here. So the Jewish leaders, they send him back to Pilate, okay? So they send him back to Fortress Antonia. Now, so here's the fortress. You can see it right here next to the Temple Mount. They send him back to Fortress Antonia, and they get a mob to come. Now, remember, this is about 7, 8 in the morning by this time. And they get a mob chanting, "Crucify him." And they're saying, if you don't kill this guy, you're not a friend of Caesar. They're trying to put pressure on Pilate to kill him. Pilate doesn't want to do it. So what Pilate does is he comes up with a plan. He takes Jesus and he has him scourged. He has him whipped with this cat of nine tails, the flesh torn off his body. Basically, he has him maimed, just beaten to the point of, of beyond recognition, physically maimed. And he places him in front of the people, puts a crown of thorns on his head, mocks him. So he publicly shames him, beats him, to the near to the point of death. Puts him in front of the people. Imagine this crowd right here, and says, "Okay, here's your king," and now let him go. Is basically the plan. I've done a terrible thing to this man. Now let him go. I've punished. He's suffered enough punishment. They say no, crucify him, because the leaders have riled up the crowd. Pilate doesn't know what else to do. He says, "Fine, crucify him." So he gives the order. So they take him. Now, if you look right here, they take him outside the city gate. So you can see this right there at the tip of my finger, a gate. Take him out that gate. Now that's outside the city walls at the time of Jesus. And it's this little area right here, the place of the skull, called Golgotha in Aramaic, cranium in the Greek, and that's where they crucify him. And it's 9 o'clock when they crucify him. So they lead him, so the present day Via Dolorosa was not where Jesus was led to the cross. They lead him out this gate and they crucify him right here. You can see a road here and a road here. So this would have been a busy intersection. So contrary to what people kind of grow up thinking, just based on songs, not based on scripture, Jesus was not crucified up on a hill. He was crucified, imagine it right there at the intersection of those two roads, at ground level, at the place where everybody would be walking by, so they could spit on him, so they could see face to face what happens when you cross the Romans. So Jesus crucified at ground level, right there. Now this location is the present site of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which means the Holy Tomb. And if you ever visit there, you're going to go, "No way is this the place," because it just doesn't look like it. But the reality is, the evidence tells us it is, because it supports the scriptural account and the layout of the city and the way it would have happened. And archaeologists have concluded that the tombs are indeed first century, and the scripture tells us that Jesus was laid in a new tomb. In other words, a tomb from that had just been cut, and that supports this site right here. So right next to this intersection, right next to this place of the skull. And we don't know why it was called the place of the skull. It might have looked like a skull face. It might have just had a lot of skulls there because that's where they killed people. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say why it was called that. So right next to it, right over here, that's where the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea was. And they laid him in that tomb. They had to take him down quick because it was the Sabbath, and they couldn't do work. So they laid him in that tomb. That was Friday. He's on the cross at 9. It goes dark at 12, and at 3 o'clock he dies. And then that's Friday at 3. So the women come back on Sunday morning, which would be April 9th. They come back in order to prepare the body because they didn't have a chance to do that on the Sabbath. And they go into the tomb. The stone's already rolled away, and he is not there.